Now, looking at these three arguments, what do we know about whoever or whatever brought this universe to be? Well, looking at the cosmological argument, we know that this being is an immaterial, timeless, and spaceless being. Why? Because this being created material, time and space. Unlike us, we need material and matter to create things. This being created material out of nothing. So that means he must be extremely powerful as well. Secondly, with the teleological argument, we see that he's extremely intelligent. Everything had to be just so, otherwise there'd be no life. And there's so many examples of fine-tuning out there. And it seems like this has purpose. It seems like even though the odds are against the idea of life existing, somehow it's in our favor. It seems to be pointing in the direction that this world was intentionally meant for us. Objective moral values with the moral argument implies that this being is absolutely morally perfect. Otherwise, he wouldn't be the standard. We'd have to look to something else. And that this being is personal. Well, why is he personal? Because nobody is obligated to fulfill a moral law to an inanimate object. It has to be personal. When you dunk a basketball, you're not sinning against the law of gravity. You only sin against somebody who's personal. Now, I haven't used the Bible at all to make these arguments, but this certainly sounds a lot like the God of biblical Christianity. Now, if our reasoning is correct so far, by looking at those three arguments, we can make some conclusions and narrow down the kind of God we're looking at. If you take a look on the left, we've got the God of theism. That's the idea that God made all. God made everything. And there are three religions that fall in that category. The religion of Judaism, the religion of Christianity, and the religion of Islam. And you see hands holding the world to show that God made everything. Now with pantheism, you have a fist inside the globe there. That's the idea that God is all. Everything in the world and in the universe is God. That includes religions like Zen Buddhism, Hinduism, the New Age, religions like that. But we have learned from our evidence so far that the universe was not eternal. It had a beginning. And if our reasoning is correct, then pantheism cannot be true, because you would need something outside of the universe for the universe to come together. God, or this universal consciousness, can't make itself, because that violates the law of non-contradiction. I can't give birth to myself. I don't exist yet. And of course, atheism says there is no God at all, which includes religious humanism and other forms of atheism. And if these three arguments for God's existence hold up, along with a lot of other arguments that I didn't even mention, I think the evidence points to a God existing rather than not existing. So I would argue from these three arguments, cosmological, teleological, and moral, that a theistic God exists. Now, I don't want to also discount feelings and experiences when talking about whether God exists. I personally can testify through my own experiences that I've sensed that Jesus Christ is real and that He's worked through my life. And there are many times where I've felt close to God and felt His presence, especially when I'm outside and I'm in His creation. I feel a lot closer to God during those circumstances. And you've probably had your own experiences and feelings, but as I'm making a case for whether Christianity is true or not, I'm not relying on those two things because they're subjective. For example, your experiences may cause you to conclude that Hinduism or Buddhism or New Age is true. My experiences, however, cause me to conclude that Christianity is true. Does that mean that either one of us did not really have an experience of some kind? Well, no, I wouldn't say that. But obviously the conclusions that we arrive at conflict. So we're kind of at a stalemate because those conclusions are unfalsifiable in and of themselves. That's why I'm introducing these arguments as well. Because not only do I make the claim that I've had personal experience, and sometimes I have feelings that make me feel close to God, but I also have these logical arguments in addition to that. And since God calls us to also love Him with all our minds, and reason allows us to look at some objective arguments for God, I believe we should give special consideration to reason, and not allow feelings and experiences be the engine that drives the train of truth. So as I'm making my case, in order to avoid that stalemate that occurs when we arrive at different conclusions depending on our experiences and feelings, I believe we should look at some of these rational arguments, and that's why I presented the cosmological argument, the teleological argument, and the moral argument. And there are many others if you're interested in looking at those as well. And as I said, I believe the evidence points to a theistic God, a God who made all but is distinct from His creation. God is not creation, He created it. because the evidence shows that the universe and everything in it had a beginning. And because God chose to create, that shows that he's personal. He's not just a force or an it or just an energy. We have no obligations to an it, but we do have obligations to somebody who is a conscious mind who created us. So now that we've narrowed this down to the three major theistic religions, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, we have to figure out where to go from here. And the arguments that I used for the existence of God use what we call general revelation, things you can observe and look at through nature, and philosophy that we can use with our minds. But if we want to narrow this down further, and I will admit that just looking at natural revelation or general revelation still keeps a lot of the specifics about God's characteristics and who he is and what he's about a mystery. So in order to solve that mystery about God, God has to be willing to reach down to us and reveal himself to us. Otherwise, we wouldn't get many specifics. And in order for him to do that, we need to look at the third question, which is, are miracles possible?